My name is Clara, and I'm 38, living in a small Ohio town where the summers hum with cicadas and the winters bite. I always dreamed of dancing at my daughter Hannah's wedding, her smile lighting up the room, her hand in mine as we swayed to some old song. But when she planned her big day, she dropped a bomb that shattered my heart. She wanted to invite Mark, the man who wrecked my marriage, her mother's affair partner. I couldn't breathe, couldn't fathom why she'd choose him over me. My chest tightened, memories of betrayal flooding back the locket she gave me as a kid, now a heavy reminder of our frayed bond. I gave her an ultimatum, and it changed everything. Has family ever broken your heart? Like and subscribe to share my story. Where are you watching from? Tell me about a time love hurt you most. I sat at my kitchen table, the locket Hannah gave me as a kid heavy around my neck. It was a cheap thing, heart-shaped with a tiny photo of us inside, but I never took it off. Its tarnished silver caught the morning light, filtering through my lace curtains, a relic of a time when her laughter filled this house. 15 years ago, my world cracked open, and I was still piecing it together. Back then, I was married to David, living in this same Ohio town, our life full of picnics by Lake Erie and Hannah's dance recitals at the community center. I worked as a school librarian, shelving books while dreaming of her future, picturing her as a teacher or a writer, her bright eyes full of promise. David was a mechanic, always tinkering, always late, his hands smudged with grease. I thought it was just work stress, the long hours at the garage, the weight of bills piling up. But then I saw the text on his phone one night when he left it on the counter, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen. Just a few words from Mark, his coworker, but they burned into me. Meet me tonight. Love you. I stood frozen, the dish I was washing slipping into the sink, the soapy water splashing my apron. My chest tightened like I couldn't get air, the room spinning as my mind raced. David was in the living room watching some baseball game, oblivious the TV's drone a cruel backdrop. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone at him, to demand answers, but Hannah was upstairs practicing her ballet steps, her music box tinkling faintly. I swallowed the rage, my hands shaking as I dried them on a towel, the cotton rough against my skin. That night, I barely slept, replaying every late shift, every excuse, every time he'd brushed off my questions with a tired smile. Had I missed the signs? Was I too trusting, too naive? The questions gnawed, keeping me awake until dawn painted the sky gray. The next day, I confronted him in our garage, the smell of oil thick in the air, tools scattered on the workbench. Is there something you need to tell me? I asked, my voice low, steady, though I was crumbling inside my heart, a fragile thing about to shatter. He looked away, wiping his hands on a rag, the silence stretching until it hurt. Then he muttered, "Nothing's going on." But his eyes betrayed him, darting to the floor. And when I pressed my voice sharper, he snapped. "Fine. Clara, it's Mark. We're together. Happy now." His words were cold, final, like a door slamming shut. Happy. I felt like I'd been punched, the air knocked out of me. My knees buckled, but I stood tall, refusing to let him see me break my nails, digging into my palms. He didn't even apologize, just walked back into the house like I was the one who'd done something wrong, his boots heavy on the gravel. I followed, numb, my mind a fog, and found Hannah in the kitchen, her crayons scattered across the table like a child's dream. She was 10, all big eyes and messy braids, drawing a picture of us at the park, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Mommy, why's Daddy mad?" she asked, her voice small, innocent. I forced a smile, tucking a braid behind her ear. my fingers trembling. "He's just tired, sweetie. Let's finish your drawing." I couldn't tell her the truth, couldn't let her world shatter too. Her happiness was all I had left. My sister Julia came over that weekend, her no-nonsense voice filling the house, cutting through the haze. She poured me coffee, slid the mug across the counter, the ceramic warm against my cold hands, and said, "Clara, you don't deserve this. Leave him. You're stronger than you think." I nodded, but inside I was drowning the weight of her words too much. Strong, I felt like a failure, like I'd missed some sign that could have saved us, like I'd let my family slip through my fingers. Julia stayed late helping me pack David's things while Hannah slept her snores soft through the wall. I kept picturing Mark, his easy smile at the garage's Christmas party, the way he'd charm everyone with his quick jokes and warm laugh. I hated him, hated how he'd stolen my life, how he'd walked into my home and left it in ruins. A few days later, I found Hannah's drawing tucked in her backpack, a colorful sketch of our family, the paper creased from her small hands. There was me, her David, and a fourth figure labeled Mark, his stick figure smile taunting me. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. She didn't know what he'd done, but seeing his name in her childish scrawl felt like a knife, sharp and personal. I shoved the drawing into a drawer, unable to look at it, the wood creaking as I slammed it shut. I wanted to protect her, to keep her world whole, but the cracks were spreading, and I didn't know how to stop them. I stood in her room, her ballet slippers dangling from the bedpost, and felt the weight of my silence, wondering if I was shielding her or betraying her by keeping the truth locked away. The weeks after David's confession were a blur of paperwork and whispered fights, the kind that left my voice hoarse and my eyes raw. I hired a lawyer, a quiet man with a cluttered office that smelled of old books, and filed for divorce. David didn't contest much, just packed a bag and moved in with Mark, leaving behind a half-empty closet and a house too big for two. I kept the house a small victory, but it felt hollow, the walls echoing with memories of laughter now gone. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me of him, his heavy steps after a long day, his voice calling Hannah for dinner. I threw myself into being Hannah's mom, driving her to school through morning fog, cheering at her recitals in a crowded auditorium, pasting on smiles while my heart ached, a constant bruise. At night, I'd sit on the porch staring at the stars over our quiet street, the air thick with summer heat, wondering how I'd failed so badly, how I'd let our life unravel. Hannah started asking questions, her voice small but persistent. "Why does Daddy live with Mark now? Is he coming back?" I'd hug her tight, her hair smelling of strawberry shampoo, and say, "Daddy's just figuring things out. We're okay, you and me." I couldn't bear to tell her Mark was more than a friend, that he'd been the spark that burned our family down. She was too young, too pure for that kind of truth. Her world still full of fairy tales and trust. But shielding her meant lying, and every lie felt like betraying her a little more, a crack in the foundation I'd sworn to keep steady. I'd tuck her in her stuffed bear, clutched tight, and linger by her door, my chest heavy with the secrets I carried. By the time Hannah was 18, we'd built a new rhythm, fragile but real. I'd gotten a promotion at the library, enough to cover dance lessons, and a used car for her, a rusty blue sedan she named Betsy. She was radiant, planning her wedding to Ethan, a sweet guy who fixed cars and made her laugh with his goofy impressions. We spent weekends flipping through bridal magazines, their glossy pages crinkling under our fingers, picking out flowers, giggling over cake flavors in my kitchen flour, dusting our aprons. For the first time in years, I felt like we were a team again, her laughter a balm to old wounds. I'd watch her try on veils at a local boutique, the mirror reflecting her joy, my chest swelling with pride, thinking maybe I'd done something right. Maybe I'd given her enough. One evening, we were at a cozy diner, its neon sign buzzing outside. splitting a milkshake, the cold glass sweating in the summer heat. Hannah pulled out her guest list, a crumpled sheet of notebook paper, and slid it across the checkered tablecloth, her eyes bright with excitement. I scanned the names, friends from her dance team, cousins from Cleveland, Ethan's loud but kind family. Then I saw it Mark. My throat tightened, the room tilting, the diner's chatter fading to a dull hum. I set the paper down, my voice barely steady, my fingers cold against the table. "Why's his name here?" I asked, each word heavy. Hannah looked confused, then shrugged, her ponytail bouncing. "He's been around forever, Mom. Dad loves him. He's practically family." Practically family. The words hit like a slap, sharp and stinging. I stared at her, searching for some sign she understood what she was saying, but her face was open, innocent, clueless about the man who'd shattered our lives. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to spill the truth I'd guarded for years. Instead, I folded my napkin, my hands trembling, the paper creasing under my grip. "He's not family." "Hannah," I said, sharper than I meant, my voice cutting through the diner's hum. She frowned, tilting her head, her fork pausing mid-bite. "Why do you hate him so much? What's the big deal?" I couldn't answer, my mind racing back to that night in the garage, David's cold admission, the drawing with Mark's name in her childish hand. I'd buried it all to protect her, and now she was inviting him to her wedding, like it was nothing, like my pain was a footnote. My sister Julia's voice echoed in my head, her warning from years ago over a glass of wine. "Don't let her get too close to him, Clara. You'll regret it." I pushed my plate away, the fries, untouched, the greasy smell turning my stomach. "Let's talk about this later," I said, my voice tight, barely holding together. Hannah rolled her eyes, muttering, "You're so dramatic sometimes," her words a small betrayal I hadn't expected. That night, I couldn't sleep, the ceiling fan's hum mocking my restlessness. I paced my bedroom, the locket digging into my chest, its chain tangled in my sweater. I pulled open a box of Hannah's old things, searching for something to ground me, my fingers brushing over faded report cards and friendship bracelets. There, tucked in a folder, was a letter she'd written at 12, addressed to Mark in her loopy handwriting. "Dear Uncle Mark," it read, "Thanks for taking me and Dad to the fair. You make him happy." I dropped it like it burned, the paper fluttering to the floor. She'd called him Uncle Mark, a title that carved a fresh wound. The betrayal sank deeper, a wound I thought I'd healed, now raw and bleeding. I shut the box, my resolve hardening, the lid snapping shut with a thud. I had to protect myself, even if it meant facing Hannah head-on, even if it meant risking the fragile bond we'd rebuilt. The diner conversation left a bruise I couldn't shake. I drove home in silence. Hannah's guest list crumpled in my purse, the car's headlights cutting through the humid night. The locket felt like a weight, a reminder of a bond I thought we'd never lose, its silver cool against my skin. The next morning, I called her, my voice steady, despite the knot in my stomach, the phone's buzz loud in the quiet kitchen. "We need to talk about Mark," I said, gripping the receiver. "Can you come over?" She sighed, already defensive, her voice tinny through the line. "Fine, Mom. But I don't get why this is such a big deal." I bit my lip, holding back the truth I'd buried for years, the weight of it pressing against my ribs. She showed up at noon, her hair tied back, looking more like the girl I raised than ever, her sneakers scuffing my hardwood floor. We sat in the living room, the coffee table between us, cluttered with bridal magazines, their bright covers a stark contrast to the tension in the air. I took a deep breath, my hands clasped tight, my knuckles pale. "Hannah, I need you to listen. This is about Mark, and it's serious." She leaned back, arms crossed, already bracing, her engagement ring glinting under the lamp. "What now, Mom? I'm tired of this." Her tone was sharp, impatient, and it stung, but I pushed forward, my voice steady but raw, each word a step into the dark. I explained, careful but firm. He's not who you think, Hannah. He hurt me, hurt our family in ways I never told you. Her eyes narrowed, skeptical, her fingers tapping the armrest. Hurt you how? You never explain anything? She said, her voice rising a challenge. I took a breath, my heart pounding the room's air, thick with dust motes swirling in the sunlight. I wanted to tell her about the affair the nights I cried myself to sleep the way Mark's name had haunted me, but the words stuck heavy and dangerous. Instead, I said, he's tied to a time that was really hard for me. Can't you trust that? My voice cracked, betraying the calm I'd tried to hold. She scoffed, leaning back further, her posture defiant. That's not fair. You're asking me to uninvite someone I care about because of some vague old drama. I stared at her, stunned, the word care a blade in my chest. She barely knew him yet. Here she was, defending the man who'd torn my life apart, her words echoing in the quiet room. The locket burned against my skin, a reminder of the girl who'd once promised to always choose me. I set my coffee down, my hands trembling, the mug clinking against the table. Hannah, this isn't just drama. It's my life. I said, my voice low, raw, with a pain I couldn't hide. She rolled her eyes, a gesture that cut deeper than words, her impatience a wall between us. You're always so stuck in the past, Mom. This is my wedding. I get to decide. Her voice was sharp, like I was the one being unreasonable, her words slicing through the fragile hope I'd clung to. I wanted to scream to make her see the betrayal, but I swallowed it, my nails digging into my palms, leaving half-moon marks. The room felt smaller, the air thick, the magazine's glossy brides mocking me. I stood needing space, my chair scraping the floor. We'll talk later, I said, my voice tight, barely holding back the storm inside. Later that week, we met at the wedding planner's office, a bright space with floral swatches pinned to the walls, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. I forced a smile, trying to focus on Hannah's joy, her excitement over table settings and vows. But then she pulled out her seating chart, a neatly typed sheet, and proudly showed me the head table, her pen circling names. Mark's name was there right next to David's, bold and unapologetic. My stomach dropped, the room spinning, the planner's chatter fading to a hum. I pointed at it, my voice low, trembling. You're still inviting him? She nodded, casual, like it was nothing, her smile bright. Yeah, he's important to Dad. I thought you'd get over it by now. Get over it. The words echoed, each one a stab sharp and relentless. I excused myself, stepping outside to breathe the spring air warm against my clammy skin, the street buzzing with cars. I leaned against the building, my vision blurring, my mind racing. Had I failed her so badly that she couldn't see my pain? Was I invisible to her now? My sacrifices erased. At work, my coworker Rachel noticed my distraction, her brow furrowing as we shelved books. Over lunch, she shared her own story about her brother, siding with their abusive dad. Her voice steady but heavy. You can't make her see it, Clara, she said, stirring her soup, the spoon clinking against the bowl. But you don't have to let it destroy you. Her words stuck a lifeline, but they didn't ease the ache, the sense that I was losing Hannah to a past I couldn't rewrite. That night, I sat on my couch, the locket in my hands, its clasp stiff from years of wear. I opened it, staring at the faded photo of me and Hannah, her gap-toothed smile from a day at the county fair, cotton candy sticky on her fingers. I'd given up so much to protect her, to keep her world intact, selling my grandmother's ring to pay the mortgage, staying up late to sew her recital costumes by hand. And now she was choosing Mark, rewriting our history like my sacrifice meant nothing, like I was a ghost in her story. I snapped the locket shut, my anger rising, a fire I hadn't felt in years. I had to do something, anything, to make her understand, to reclaim the space I'd lost. But what if it pushed her away for good? The question hung unanswered as the night stretched on the house, too quiet, my resolve teetering on the edge. The seating chart. Mark's name, inked so casually, haunted me, a specter I couldn't shake. I spent hours online scrolling through his social media, a polished life, staring back each post a twist of the knife. He and David had a sleek apartment in Columbus, photos of vacations to Maine, wine tastings, a life I could never afford, their smiles mocking my struggle. My sacrifice, giving up alimony to keep our house for Hannah's stability, felt like a cruel joke, the memory of signing those papers in a cold lawyer's office stinging anew. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse racing, the room's shadows closing in. Why did he get to waltz into her wedding while I was begging to be heard? My voice drowned out by their carefree joy. I called David, something I hadn't done in years, my fingers trembling as I dialed. He picked up, his voice clipped, impatient, the sound of a TV in the background. "What do you want, Clara?" I swallowed, forcing calm, my words measured. "Tell Hannah not to invite Mark. It's not right." He laughed, cold and sharp, the sound cutting through me. "Mark's part of her life. You don't get to control that." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, the plastic creaking. "You owe me this," I said, my voice breaking the plea raw. He hung up, leaving me with nothing but static and rage, the silence louder than his words. The next blow came at a dress fitting the boutique's soft lighting, and velvet chairs, a cruel contrast to my turmoil. Hannah twirled in her gown, radiant, the lace shimmering as she moved, while I sat clutching my purse, its strap worn from years of use. She chatted about the ceremony, her voice bubbling, then dropped it like it was nothing, her words casual as she adjusted her veil. "I want Dad and Mark to walk me down the aisle together. It's modern, you know." My mouth went dry, the room spinning, the seamstress's pins clinking faintly. I stared at her, my heart a stone. "You're replacing me," I whispered, barely audible, the words slipping out. She frowned, her reflection sharp in the mirror. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. It's not about you." Ethan, lingering nearby, nodded like it made perfect sense, his quiet agreement a fresh wound. I left the shop, my vision blurring, the sidewalk hot under my feet. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel, my breaths shallow, the leather warm from the sun. Replacing me. After everything, she was rewriting our family, erasing my place, my years of quiet sacrifice. I drove to the lake where we used to picnic now, just a muddy shore, the water dull under a gray sky. I sat on a bench, the wind biting my coat too thin, and remembered the divorce, how I'd sold my jewelry to pay bills, how I'd stayed up sewing Hannah's recital costumes, my fingers pricked by needles, all for her. And now, this her choice to elevate Mark, to diminish me. Rachel's words at work echoed, but they felt distant, like a song I couldn't hear. I went home and found an old voicemail on my phone. Hannah's voice at 12, bubbly and bright, saved from a day she'd called from camp. "Mom, you're my best friend. I'll always choose you." I played it again, tears falling, the sound tinny but piercing. How had we gotten here? I looked at the locket on my dresser, untouched since the diner, its chain coiled like a snake. Part of me wanted to throw it out, to sever the pain, to be free of her betrayal. But I couldn't, not yet, the weight of her love still anchoring me. Hannah's next call pushed me further. She was at the venue, Her voice excited the sound of clinking glasses in the background. I finalized the guest list, Mom. Mark's giving a toast. A toast. The man who broke our family celebrated like a hero, his voice ringing out where mine had been silenced. I couldn't speak, my throat tight, the phone heavy in my hand. Hannah, I said finally, this hurts me more than you know. She sighed, impatient, her tone clipped. You need to move on. I hung up the silence, deafening my heart, a raw, open wound. She didn't care. My daughter, my heart was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it, my voice lost in the noise of her new life. I couldn't keep pretending. Hannah's plan to have Mark give a toast was the final straw, a blade twisting in my chest, sharp and relentless. I invited her to the house, determined to lay it all bare, to make her see the truth I'd guarded for too long. She arrived late, her hair tied back, looking more like the girl I raised than ever, her backpack slung over one shoulder. We sat in the living room, the coffee table between us cluttered with bridal magazines, their pages curling in the humid air. I took a deep breath, my hands clasped tight, my knuckles aching. Hannah, I need you to listen. This is about Mark, and it's serious, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She leaned back, arms crossed already, bracing her engagement ring, glinting like a warning. What now? Mom, I'm tired of this, she said, her tone sharp, dismissive. I ignored the jab, my voice steady but raw, each word a weight I'd carried alone. When you were 10, your dad didn't just leave. He was with Mark. Not as friends. They were together. Mark was the reason our family broke. Her eyes widened, but she shook her head, her ponytail swaying. That's not true. Dad would have told me, she said, her voice rising defiant. I pressed on my throat tight, the memory of that night in the garage flooding back. I saw the messages. I confronted him. He admitted it. I kept it from you, to protect you. Hannah stood, pacing, her hands in her hair, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. You're lying! Why would you make this up? She shouted. Her face flushed, her eyes wild. I stood too, my voice rising, despite myself, the dam breaking. I'm not lying. I gave up everything to keep you safe, to give you a home, and now you're letting him into your wedding like he's some saint. She spun around, her breath ragged. If this is true, why didn't you tell me sooner? You let me think he was family. I froze, her words cutting deep. A truth I hadn't faced. I wanted you to have a dad, I whispered, my voice breaking, my hands trembling. I thought I was doing right. She grabbed her bag, her voice shaking, tears streaking her face. I need proof, Mom. I don't believe you. She stormed toward the door, but I stepped in front, desperate, my heart pounding. Hannah, please. This is why I can't be there if he is. I can't watch him take my place. Her eyes locked on mine, furious hurt, a storm of emotions I couldn't calm. You're ruining my wedding. If you can't come, that's on you, she said, her voice cold, final. She pushed past me, the door slamming behind her, the sound echoing in the empty house. I sank onto the couch, my breaths ragged, the silence suffocating, the magazine's perfect brides a cruel mockery. Had I just lost her? My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Julia, her name lighting up the screen. I called her, told her everything, my voice breaking, tears falling onto my lap. She sighed, gentle but firm, her voice steady through the line. I warned Hannah years ago Mark wasn't good for her. She didn't listen. I stared at the wall, stunned, my mind reeling. You told her. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice sharp, betrayal layering on betrayal. Julia hesitated, her pause heavy. I thought she'd come around. I'm sorry, Clara, she said, her voice soft but unyielding. I hung up my mind, a whirlwind, Julia's secret meddling, a fresh wound. Hannah's refusal to believe me, a deeper one. I walked to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I poured water, spilling it on the counter, the droplets pooling like my scattered thoughts. The truth was out, but it hadn't fixed anything. It had only driven Hannah further away, her anger a wall I couldn't climb. I looked at the locket on the table, its shine dulled by years, a relic of a love now fractured. Part of me wanted to rip it off, to let go of the girl who didn't see me anymore, to free myself from the pain. But I couldn't, not yet, the weight of her still anchoring me to a past I couldn't escape. The days before Hannah's wedding blurred into a haze of dread, each one heavier than the last. I stayed home, avoiding her calls, my heart a tangled mess of hope, and hurt, the locket a constant weight around my neck. I kept replaying our fight, her disbelief, the way she'd slam the door, the sound still ringing in my ears. I wanted to be there to see her in her dress, to hold her hand as she stepped into her new life. But Mark's presence felt like a wall I couldn't climb, a betrayal I couldn't endure. On the morning of the wedding, I sat at my dining table, a cup of tea gone cold, the steam long vanished. I pulled out old videos, Hannah's first recital, her tiny tutu flapping as she twirled on a creaky stage, her grin wide under the spotlight. I laughed, then sobbed, the ache unbearable, a physical pain in my chest. I couldn't go, but I couldn't stay still. The house too quiet, too full of ghosts. I drove to the church, parking across the street, hidden by a row of oaks, their leaves rustling in the breeze. The lot was full, music spilling out a joyful melody that felt like a taunt. Guests in bright dresses and pressed suits milled about, their laughter carrying over the hum of cicadas. I saw Ethan nervous in his suit, adjusting his tie, then David arm in arm with Mark, both smiling like they owned the day, their ease, a stark contrast to my turmoil. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I gripped the steering wheel, my breath shallow, telling myself to leave, to spare myself the pain. But then Hannah appeared, her gown glowing in the sunlight, her arm looped through David's, her veil trailing like a dream. Mark walked beside them, his suit crisp, his grin wide, a victor in my defeat. She'd chosen him. I stayed frozen, watching as they entered the church, the doors closing behind them, the wood thudding shut like a verdict. My phone buzzed, a message from Rachel, my co-worker who'd gone as a guest, her text an intrusion I hadn't asked for. Clara, it's beautiful, but I'm so sorry. Mark's giving a speech. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking, the screen cracking against the dashboard. A speech. Not just a guest, but a star of her day, his voice ringing out where mine had been silenced. I imagined him standing there, charming the crowd, with his easy laugh, while I sat in my car, erased from her story, my presence reduced to nothing. Rachel sent a photo, blurry but clear enough. Hannah at the altar, Mark raising a glass nearby, his smile smug. I zoomed in, searching her face for regret, for any sign she felt my absence, but she was smiling, her eyes bright with joy. My chest caved, a sob breaking free, the car's confines suffocating. I drove home, the world a smear through my tears, the road blurring into the dusk. Inside, I opened a drawer, pulling out the locket, its chain tangled from neglect. I held it, my fingers tracing its edges, then set it on the counter, the metal cold against the wood. It felt like letting her go, like cutting a thread I'd clung to for years. I sank to the floor, the tiles cold against my knees, and let the sobs come raw and unrelenting, my body shaking with the weight of loss. My phone lit up again, this time a text from David, his words sharp and accusing. You made your choice, Clara. Don't blame Hannah. I stared at the words, fury mixing with grief, a fire in my veins. He'd poisoned her against me, and Mark was the proof standing where I should have been celebrated while I was forgotten. I wanted to fight, to storm the reception and scream the truth to make them all see the cost of their choices. But I was empty. My strength drained, my heart a hollow shell. The wedding was happening without me. My daughter's new life built on a lie I couldn't undo. I curled up, the weight of it crushing, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again, the darkness of the house swallowing me whole. The wedding night left me hollow, the image of Hannah's smile with Mark burned into my mind, a wound that wouldn't close. I spent the next morning staring at my phone, David's text still glaring. You made your choice. I deleted it, my hands steady for the first time in days, a quiet resolve settling in. Enough was enough. I couldn't keep clinging to a daughter who'd chosen to erase me, who'd built her joy on my pain. I opened my contacts, found Hannah's number, and blocked it, the act final, like closing a book. Then I went to my laptop, unfollowed her on every platform, her wedding posts vanishing from my feed, the curated images of her happiness fading to black. It hurt, a sharp pang in my chest, but it was a clean cut, a line I needed to draw to breathe again. I stood in my kitchen, the locket still on the counter where I'd left it, its silver dull under the fluorescent light. I didn't touch it, couldn't bear its weight. Instead, I grabbed a notepad, its pages yellowed from years in a drawer, and started writing something I hadn't done since the divorce, when I'd journaled to survive. Dear Hannah, I began my pen, shaking, ink smudging as I pressed too hard. I poured out everything, the affair, the years of silence to protect her, the pain of seeing Mark at her wedding, his presence, a theft of my place. I wrote about my love, how I'd fought for her, selling my mother's china to keep her in dance, working double shifts to pay for her prom dress. And I wrote why I had to step back now to save myself from a hurt that wouldn't heal. I didn't plan to send it, but each word felt like reclaiming a piece of me, a fragment of the woman I'd lost. That afternoon, I called a therapist I'd found online, Dr. Ellis, a woman with a calm voice that steadied me through the phone. I booked a session, my first ever, my voice trembling as I confirmed the time. When I met her in a small office with sage green walls and a box of tissues, she listened as I unraveled the wedding, my voice cracking, tears soaking my scarf. Why does it feel like I failed her? I asked, my hands twisting in my lap. She leaned forward, her eyes kind, her notepad untouched. You protected her, Clara, but you can't control her choices. What do you want for yourself? Now I didn't have an answer, but the question stuck, a seed in barren soil, a flicker of possibility in the dark. I needed something new, something mine, a life not defined by loss. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, a whim I'd never indulged, drawn by a flyer tacked to a bulletin board. The first session, I sat at a wheel, clay slick under my fingers, the hum of the wheel grounding me, its rhythm a counterpoint to my racing thoughts. The instructor, a wiry woman named Sarah, showed me how to shape a bowl, her hands deft and sure. You've got to push, but not too hard, she said, her voice warm, her apron streaked with clay. I nodded, feeling the clay resist, then yield, a small victory that steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Hannah, wasn't drowning in her betrayal. At work, I told Rachel about the class over coffee, the library's break room smelling of burnt toast. She grinned, stirring her latte, her earrings glinting. Good for you, Clara. You're not just surviving now, you're living. Her words hit deep, a truth I hadn't named. I'd been surviving for years, piecing together a life for Hannah, my own dreams buried under her needs. Now I had to build one for me to find a spark that wasn't tied to her. I joined a book club at the library, a small group of women who argued over novels and shared wine, their voices filling the quiet evenings. One night, a woman named Gail talked about her estranged son, her voice soft, her hands cradling a glass. "I cut contact to save myself," she said, her eyes distant. "It's not easy, but it's freedom." I listened, my heart racing, the word freedom a beacon. I wanted that, needed it. I started small, rearranging my living room, moving Hannah's old dance trophies to a box in the attic, their gold plastic dulled by dust. I painted the walls a soft blue, the color of a calm sky. The brushstrokes steady, each one a choice, a step away from the past. I wasn't erasing Hannah, but I was making space for myself, for a life that didn't revolve around her absence. At pottery, I shaped my first piece, a lumpy mug, its edges uneven, and laughed when it wobbled on the table. Sarah clapped, her eyes bright, her hands dusted with clay. "That's it, Clara. Keep going." I felt a spark, a quiet strength I hadn't known was there, a fire kindling in the ashes of my grief. The pottery class became my anchor, a steady point in a world that had spun out of control. Each week, I molded clay, my hands learning its rhythm, the cool, gritty texture, a contrast to the chaos in my mind. Sarah, the instructor, became a friend, her sharp wit cutting through my fog, her laughter a balm. Over coffee after class in a small shop with mismatched mugs, she shared her story, a divorce that left her raising 2 kids alone. Her voice steady but heavy. "You don't get over it," she said, stirring sugar into her cup, the spoon clinking softly. "You build around it." Her words sank in a blueprint for the life I was starting to shape, a life where I didn't need Hannah's approval to feel whole. I needed to see myself, to find the woman I'd buried under years of sacrifice. I volunteered at the community center, mentoring girls in a reading program, their eager faces a mirror of Hannah at that age, though I pushed the thought aside, focusing on them. One girl, Mia, shy and 12 with braids and a quiet voice, asked me to read her story, a tale of a lost dog finding home scribbled in a spiral notebook. "It's beautiful," I told her, my throat tight, her words stirring something deep. "You're stronger than you know." She beamed, her smile wide, and I felt a warmth I hadn't in years, a purpose that wasn't tied to my pain. I stayed late helping them write, their pencils scratching, their laughter filling the room, a sound that eased the ache I carried. At home, I tackled the garage, a space cluttered with relics of my old life, boxes stacked like monuments to the past. I sorted through them, finding Hannah's old art projects, her glittery handprints on faded paper, each one a memory of a time before the fracture. My instinct was to keep them, to hold on to the girl she'd been, but I chose differently, my hands steady as I packed them away. I donated most, keeping only a small sketch of a sunflower she'd drawn at 8, its petals bright against the page. It went on my fridge, a quiet nod to her without chaining me to the past, a symbol of love that didn't own me. The garage became a studio, my pottery wheel in the corner, clay dust settling like a new beginning. The space mine in a way the house hadn't been. My sister Julia called one evening, her voice tense, the line crackling with her urgency. "You're shutting Hannah out, Clara. She's your daughter." I set my jaw, stirring soup on the stove, the steam rising in curls. "I'm not shutting her out. I'm saving myself," I said, my voice firm, the words a declaration. She argued, her words sharp, insisting I was too harsh, that family was worth fighting for. But I held firm, the soup's simmer, a quiet counterpoint to her pleas. We hung up the rift between us wider, her disapproval, a weight I refused to carry. I didn't need her approval, not anymore. For once, I trusted my own path, a choice that felt like stepping into light. At therapy, Dr. Ellis pushed me to explore that trust her office, a haven of soft light and calm. "What does Clara want?" she asked again. Her pen poised, her eyes steady. I paused the question a mirror, then said, "To be whole. Not for Hannah, but for me." The words felt true, a vow I hadn't known I could make. I started writing more, not just letters to Hannah, but dreams I'd buried, a trip to the coast, a garden of my own, a life unapologetically mine. My journal filled its pages, a map of a future I was beginning to see. One evening, I walked to the book club, the air crisp with fall leaves crunching under my boots. Gail, the woman who'd cut off her son, pulled me aside on the library steps, her scarf bright against the dusk. She handed me a worn journal, its leather cover soft, her entries about rebuilding after betrayal scrawled in tight script. "Read this," she said, her voice low. "It's not easy, but it's yours." I took it, my fingers tracing the cover, a gift that felt like a lifeline. That night, I read her words, her pain mirroring mine, her resilience, a beacon. I felt less alone, part of a quiet chorus of women who'd survived. At pottery, I shaped a new piece, a wide, shallow bowl with jagged edges like a heart, split open, its form raw and honest. Sarah watched, nodding, her hands dusted with clay. "That's you," she said, her voice warm. Broken, but holding. I smiled, my hands steady, the wheels hum, a steady pulse. When it dried, I painted it deep red, the color of resilience, each brushstroke a choice. I set it on my mantle, its weight grounding me, a symbol of what I'd made from the ruins. As I stood back, the house quiet, the lamplight soft, I realized I wasn't waiting for Hannah anymore. I was living, not just surviving. I closed my journal, the pen still, and let the silence settle, a strength I'd earned, a peace that felt like home. 2 years slipped by, each day a quiet stitch in the life I'd built, a tapestry of small victories. My home was brighter now, the blue walls catching morning light through new curtains. I'd sewn my red pottery bowl, a steady presence on the mantle, its jagged edges a quiet pride. I'd been promoted at the library, leading story time for kids, their laughter filling gaps I hadn't noticed, their eager hands waving as I read. The community center buzzed with girls like Mia, whose stories I read with pride, their words a mirror of my own growth. I hadn't spoken to Hannah, her number still blocked her absence. A dull ache I'd learned to carry, like a bruise that no longer stung, but never quite faded. One evening, I checked my email, sorting through work messages, the glow of my laptop, the only light in the room. A new email stopped me cold. Hannah's name in the sender line, the subject blank. My heart thudded, a rhythm I hadn't felt in years as I opened it. "Mom, I miss you." It began, her words simple but heavy. "I know I hurt you. Can we talk? I'm sorry for the wedding, for everything. Mark's gone from my life now. I want to make this right." I read it twice, my hands trembling, the words blurring as tears welled. "Sorry. Miss you." They felt real, but so did my scars, the memory of her wedding, a wound I'd learned to live with. I sat back, the screen glowing in the dim room, the house silent but for the tick of a clock. Part of me wanted to reply, to run to her, to bridge the gap with a single call. But another part, the one that had painted these walls, hesitated, wary of the cost. I'd spent years shielding her, then months rebuilding myself brick by brick. Could I trust her now, after the betrayal that had nearly broken me? I closed the laptop, my breath uneven, and walked to the garage, my studio now the air cool and earthy. My pottery wheel sat quiet, a lump of clay weighting its surface smooth under my fingers. I touched it, grounding myself, but her words clung like damp air, heavy with possibility and risk. The next day, I told Sarah about the email over lunch at a small cafe, the clink of dishes soft around us, the smell of fresh bread warm in the air. She sipped her tea, her eyes steady, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "You've come so far, Clara. If you meet her set boundaries, protect what you've built," she said, her voice firm but kind. I nodded, stirring my soup, the broth, swirling her advice, solid but heavy, a reminder of the life I'd fought for. At therapy, Dr. Ellis asked, "What does your heart say?" Her voice a gentle prod, her office warm with afternoon light. I fumbled, my voice low, my scarf bunched in my hands. "I want her back, but I'm scared she'll break me again." She wrote something down her pen, scratching softly. "That fear is valid. Take it slow," she said, her words a guidepost. I reread Hannah's email that night, each line a tug at old wounds, the screen's glow harsh against the dark. She mentioned Mark's absence, but not why the omission, a question mark. Had she learned the truth, or was this just regret born of convenience? I wondered if David had finally told her, if the cracks in their life had mirrored mine. The apology was vague. No details, just regret, a shadow of accountability. I typed a reply, my fingers hesitant, then deleted it, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I wasn't ready, not yet, the trust too fragile to test. I walked to the fridge, where Hannah's sunflower sketch hung its edges, curling the paper soft from time. I touched it, my chest tight, remembering her small hands drawing at her giggle as she handed it to me. Love hadn't faded, but trust was another matter, a bridge I wasn't sure I could cross. At the book club, I shared the email with Gail, the woman who'd given me her journal, her words a lifeline in my darkest days. We sat on her porch, fireflies blinking in the dusk, the air cool against my skin. She listened, her hands folded, her rocking chair creaking softly. "My son wrote me once," she said, her voice steady, her eyes distant. "I met him, but I kept my guard up. You decide what you can carry, Clara." Her words settled in a reminder of my own strength, a truth I'd earned. I drove home, the night thick, the stars sharp above the quiet town. Hannah's email unanswered, its weight pressing against the life I'd fought for, a life I wasn't ready to risk. I waited 3 days before replying to Hannah's email, each one a test of my resolve. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, each word a step on thin ice, the laptop's hum loud in the quiet night. "Let's meet." I wrote, my heart pounding. "Neutral ground, just us. Name a time and place." I hit send, my stomach nodding, then shut my laptop, the screen's glow fading to black. The house was quiet, the red pottery bowl catching a slant of moonlight, its edges sharp but steady, a symbol of my own resilience. I didn't sleep imagining her face, wondering if she'd changed, if I had the questions circling like moths around a flame. When her reply came, suggesting a cafe downtown for Saturday, I felt a jolt, part hope, part dread, a current pulling me forward and back. Saturday morning, I dressed carefully, a simple sweater, my hair pulled back, the mirror reflecting a woman I was starting to know. I slipped the locket into my pocket, its weight a reminder of what we'd been, a tether to the past. I wasn't ready to cut. The cafe was small, with wooden tables and the hum of conversation, the smell of espresso sharp in the air. Hannah was already there in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug, steam curling upward. She looked older, her eyes softer, but her posture was tense, like she was bracing for a fight, her scarf loose around her neck. I slid into the seat across from her, my voice low steady, despite the tremor in my chest. "Thanks for coming," I said. My hands folded the table's grain, rough under my fingers. She nodded, her gaze flickering to the table, her fingers tightening on the mug. "Mom, I'm so sorry." She started, her voice cracking, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know about Mark, not really. Dad made it seem normal, like it was just how things were." I listened, my hands still, as she stumbled through her guilt, her words halting raw. "I invited him because I thought it'd make Dad happy. I didn't think about you, about what it meant." Her words were a knife, not because they were new, but because they were honest, a truth she'd finally faced. I looked at her, searching for the girl who'd drawn that sunflower, but saw a woman grappling with her choices, her face etched with regret. I took a breath, my voice steady but raw, each word a weight I'd carried too long. "You didn't think about me, Hannah. That's what broke me. I gave up everything for you, worked nights to keep our home, hid my pain, to keep yours at bay, and you let him stand where I should have been." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't look away, her tears falling silently, leaving trails on her cheeks. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her hands trembling. "I was wrong, so wrong." I leaned back, the locket heavy in my pocket, its edges pressing into my thigh. "Why now?" I asked, my voice low, searching. She hesitated, her gaze dropping, then said, "Mark and Dad split up. I see things clearer now. See what I did to you?" I didn't expect that, and it stung, the idea that their breakup, not my pain, had opened her eyes, a truth that cut deeper than I'd braced for. The cafe's noise faded, the space between us thick, the clatter of dishes a distant hum. I wanted to ask more, to dig into her regret, to understand why now, but my phone buzzed, a text from Julia flashing on the screen. "Don't let her hurt you again." I ignored it, but her warning echoed, a shadow on this fragile moment, a reminder of the trust I'd lost. Hannah reached for my hand, her fingers tentative, but I pulled back. Not ready, my heart guarded. "I need time," I said, my voice firm, the words a boundary I hadn't known I could set. She nodded, tears falling, but didn't push her silence, a small concession. We sat in silence, the coffee cold, the weight of years pressing down a chasm we couldn't yet bridge. I left the cafe, the autumn air sharp against my skin, the leaves skittering across the sidewalk. Hannah's tears stayed with me, her regret a tangible thing, but so did her delay, her clarity tied to Mark's absence rather than my pain. I walked home, the locket untouched in my pocket, my steps slow, deliberate. The strength I'd built, the life I'd carved from the wreckage, felt fragile, now tested by her presence, by the pull of a love I couldn't fully trust. I stood in my doorway, the house dark, the air still, and felt the ache settle deeper, a quiet bruise. I couldn't name a wound that hadn't yet found its healing. The cafe meeting lingered like a half-remembered dream. Hannah's words a mix of hope and hesitation. I didn't reply to her follow-up text, needing space to process, to weigh her regret against my scars. My mornings started with tea. Now the kettles whistle, a soft ritual. As I sat on the porch, a quilt over my knees, watching the Ohio sunrise paint the sky pink. The library was a haven, the kids' story time, a joy, their giggles, a counterpoint to the quiet ache I carried. I mentored at the community center, watching Mia and the other girls grow their stories bolder each week, their confidence a mirror of my own slow rebuilding. Hannah's absence was still there, but it was softer a shadow I'd learned to navigate. I texted her after a week, small gestures to test the waters, a recipe for her favorite shortbread. A photo of a novel she'd loved as a teen, its cover worn from her hands. Her replies were tentative, a single line or a quick thanks. But they were there, a thread we were weaving, fragile, but real. In therapy, I told Dr. Ellis about it, my voice steady, my hands resting in my lap. I want her in my life, but not at the cost of me. I said the words of vow. She nodded, her eyes warm, her pen still. What does family mean to you now, Clara? She asked her question a mirror. I paused, the air heavy with thought. People who see you, I said, finally my voice firm, who choose you back, not out of duty but love. I started visiting the farmers market on weekends, a new habit, the stalls vibrant with apples, fresh bread, and bundles of lavender, their scent sharp and grounding. I'd wander my basket heavy and think of my mistakes, not just with Hannah, but with myself. I'd shielded her too long, built my life around her needs, lost myself in the process. Admitting it wasn't easy, but it was like pulling a weed clearing space for something new. I bought a small pot of rosemary, its needles prickly, and set it on my windowsill, a symbol of resilience, a promise to tend to myself. At the community center, I ran a workshop teaching the girls to write letters to their future selves, their pencils scratching their faces, bright with focus. Mia handed me hers, sealed with a star sticker, her smile shy. "What'd you write?" I asked, leaning down. "That I'm brave even when I'm scared," she said, her voice clear. I hugged her, my heart full, her words echoing my own journey, the courage to choose myself despite the fear. I drove home, the rosemary's scent filling the car, and felt a calm I hadn't known I could claim, a peace that wasn't tied to Hannah's presence. I invited Hannah for coffee, a different cafe this time, with wide windows and the murmur of jazz, the tables worn from years of hands. She showed up in a green scarf, her smile tentative, her hands fidgeting with her bag. We talked about small things, her job at a daycare, the kids' messy crafts, my pottery class, the feel of clay under my nails. No mention of Mark or the wedding, just us testing the water, our voices soft against the music. I watched her stir sugar into her latte, her movements careful, and saw glimpses of the girl I'd raised, her laugh unchanged. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a fragile thread I wanted to hold, a connection I was learning to trust. Back home, I set a new vase on my table, its glaze a soft green, a piece I'd made in class. I stood there, the house quiet, the evening light slanting through the windows, and thought of Dr. Ellis's question. Family wasn't just Hannah or the past I'd clung to. It was the girls at the center, the book club, women, the life I'd built from the ground up. I breathed slow, the weight of years easing, a quiet peace settling in my bones, a strength that felt like home. Our coffee meetings became a rhythm, careful but steady, like a song we were learning, note by note. Hannah and I met every few weeks, always somewhere neutral, like the jazz cafe or a park bench by the river, the water's ripple a quiet backdrop. We didn't dig into the past, just shared bits of our lives, her stories of daycare, chaos, paint-splattered kids, my tales of shaping clay, the wheels hum, a constant in my days. It was cautious, like learning to walk again after a fall, each step deliberate. I liked it that way, the space to breathe, to see her without the weight of what was to find a new way to be us. One afternoon, I asked her to my pottery studio, a concrete room at the community center, its walls splattered with dried clay, the air earthy and cool. She hesitated at the door, her eyes scanning the wheels and kilns, then stepped in her boots, soft on the floor, her presence a strange fit in my new world. I showed her my wheel, the half-finished vase I was shaping its curves, uneven but honest. "Try it," I said, handing her an apron, its ties frayed. She laughed, nervous, but sat down, her hands clumsy on the clay, her fingers slipping. It wobbled, then collapsed into a lumpy heap, and we both burst out laughing, the sound echoing in the quiet space, free and unguarded. For a moment, we were just us, no history, no pain, just a mother and daughter sharing a fleeting joy. We talked as we cleaned up, her voice softer than I'd heard in years, the clay scraping under our nails. "I messed up, Mom," she said, brushing dust off the table, her eyes down. "I should have listened to you, should have seen you." I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag, my heart steady, the words I'd longed for, now real, but complex. "I messed up too," I said, my voice low, honest. "I held on too tight, tried to protect you from things you needed to know." Her eyes met mine, searching, and I saw regret, but also something new. A willingness to try to meet me halfway. We didn't hug, didn't need to. The moment enough, a bridge we were building plank by plank. That evening, my phone buzzed, a text from David, his name a jolt. He wanted to talk, to be a family again. His words slick with charm I'd once fallen for. I read it, my jaw tight. The screen's glow harsh in the dark kitchen, and deleted it without replying. The act, final freeing. His pull was gone, a shadow. I'd outgrown, his promises empty against the life I'd built. I walked to my living room, where my red pottery bowl sat, its jagged edges catching the lamplight, a testament to my own strength. I ran my fingers over it, the clay cool and solid, a reminder of what I'd made from brokenness, a life that was mine. I invited Hannah for dinner at my place, the first time in years, the decision a leap I hadn't planned. She came with a bottle of wine, her smile shy, but real, her hair loose around her shoulders. We cooked together, chopping vegetables, the kitchen warm with garlic and rosemary, our movements syncing like they used to. Over plates of pasta, steam rising, I gave her a small box, a new locket, silver and simple, no photo inside its surface, smooth under the light. "It's for you to fill," I said, my voice soft, a gift of possibility, a fresh start. She held it, her eyes glistening, and slipped it on the chain, glinting against her sweater. A quiet promise. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick, and I felt a knot loosen, not gone, but lighter, a weight I could carry differently now. After she left, I stood at my sink washing dishes, the water warm against my hands, the house still, the night soft outside. The rosemary on my windowsill had grown its needles sharp, a small triumph. I looked out the window, the stars bright above the trees, and felt a calm. I'd earned a peace that didn't need to be perfect. I'd spent years fighting for Hannah, then for myself, learning to hold both without losing either. I dried my hands, the towel soft, and let the silence wrap around me, a quiet strength that felt like coming home. The dinner with Hannah marked a shift, like the first warm day after a long Ohio winter, the air soft with promise. We didn't rush to fill the gaps, but we kept talking, meeting for walks along the river, or quick lunches at a deli, the smell of rye bread grounding us. I started my mornings differently now, brewing tea instead of coffee. The kettle's steam curling in the dawn light, sitting on my porch, with a blanket watching the neighborhood wake dogs barking in the distance. The library felt less like a job, and more like a calling. Each story I read to kids, a small spark of joy, their questions, a reminder of life's wonder. My life wasn't perfect, but it was steady, built on choices I'd made for myself, each one a step toward wholeness. One Saturday, I drove to a nearby nursery, the gravel crunching under my tires, picking out seeds for a garden I'd always wanted, a dream I'd shelved for years. I spent the afternoon kneeling in my backyard dirt under my nails, planting basil and marigolds, the soil cool and rich. Each seed a promise of growth I could trust. The act was simple, but it grounded me. The earths give a contrast to the chaos I'd known. At the community center, I watched Mia graduate from the reading program, her smile wide as she hugged me, her certificate crinkling in her hand. "You helped me believe in myself," she said, her voice bright, her braids swinging. I held her tight, my heart full, knowing I'd found purpose beyond my own pain, a legacy that wasn't tied to loss. Therapy with Dr. Ellis became a space to unravel the past, not just Hannah, but me, my own roots. I talked about my fear of losing her again, how I'd tied my worth to being her mom, how I'd lost myself in that role. "You're more than that, Clara," Dr. Ellis said, her voice calm, her eyes steady, the sunlight slanting through her window. "You're enough on your own, a whole person with dreams and strength." I let that sink in, the idea that I didn't need to prove myself to anyone, that my value wasn't tied to Hannah's choices. At home, I hung a new mirror in my hallway, its frame carved with vines, the wood warm under my fingers. I caught my reflection, older but stronger, a woman I was starting to know, her eyes clear, her jaw set with quiet resolve. I met Hannah at a park one evening, the sky streaked with pink, the air cool with spring. We sat on a bench, tossing bread to ducks, their quacks sharp in the quiet, our conversation easy, unforced. She told me about a new project at work, her eyes bright, her hands animated, and I shared stories of my garden, the marigolds just sprouting their green tips, a small victory. We didn't talk about the wedding or Mark, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore, not a wall, but a space room for us to be without the past's weight. I watched her laugh, her hair catching the light, and felt a quiet pride, not just in her, but in me for holding on, without breaking, for finding a way to love her differently. Sarah, my pottery friend, joined us for coffee one day, her presence a bridge between my worlds, her laugh warm in the cafe's hum. She talked about her kids, her own healing after her divorce. Her stories, raw but hopeful, and Hannah listened, her face open, her coffee cooling, untouched. I saw them connect, two women who'd known lost their words, weaving a thread I hadn't expected. It struck me how far I'd come, not alone, but with people who saw me, who chose me back. Back home, I watered my garden, the soil dark and rich. The marigolds taller, now their buds tight with promise. I stood still, the evening air cool, the crickets loud, and felt the hurt soften a scar I could touch without wincing a wound that had begun to heal. One Sunday, I invited Hannah to my backyard, the garden now blooming with marigolds and basil, their colors bright against the green. We sat on folding chairs, the sun warm on our shoulders, sipping iced tea, the glasses sweating in our hands. She noticed the small tree I'd planted, its leaves still tender, its trunk thin but steady. "What's that for?" she asked, her voice curious, her eyes tracing its branches. I smiled, setting my glass down on the grass, the blades cool under my fingers. "It's for me," I said, my voice soft but sure. A reminder that things grow even after hard seasons, that life finds a way. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, and I saw understanding in her eyes, a quiet respect for the life I'd built, for the woman I'd become. I thought about the years behind us, the choices we'd both made, the pain we'd carried. I'd held on to hurt too long, thinking it defined me, that it was all I had left of our family. But letting go didn't mean forgetting, didn't mean erasing the love or the loss. It meant choosing to live not just for Hannah, but for the woman I'd found in the wreckage, the one who'd painted her walls blue, who'd shaped clay into something whole. Forgiveness wasn't a grand gesture, a sweeping moment of absolution. It was small, daily, like tending a garden, pulling weeds, watering roots, trusting the slow work of growth. I looked at Hannah, her face soft in the sunlight, her presence a gift I hadn't expected, and knew we'd keep growing together, but separate each on our own path, each choosing the other in a new way. Julia and I talked again over lunch at a quiet diner, the jukebox playing soft country tunes. She admitted she'd been hard on me, her worry clouding her words, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. "I'm proud of you, Clara," she said, her voice steady, her eyes meeting mine. "You didn't give up, not on Hannah, not on yourself." I squeezed her hand, the rift between us, mending the warmth of her touch, a reminder of our shared history. We weren't perfect, but we were family, choosing each other in our own way, flawed, but real. That was enough, more than enough. At home, I walked through my house, the mirror in the hallway, reflecting a woman who'd fought and healed, her eyes bright with a quiet strength. I wore both lockets, now the old one from Hannah, its photo faded but cherished, and the new one I'd given her, its empty space, a promise of what could be. I'd learned that healing wasn't about erasing scars, but living with them, letting them tell a story of resilience, of a woman who'd fallen and risen. I wasn't just Hannah's mom or David's ex-roles that had once defined me. I was Clara whole in my own right, free to choose who I'd be next, to dream without fear. As I stood by my tree, its roots sinking deeper each day, its leaves catching the breeze, I felt a peace that didn't need words, a stillness that held me. Life wasn't about winning or being right, about proving my pain or claiming victory. It was about showing up for yourself, for the people who stayed, for the ones who came back, about choosing love, even when it hurt. I'd lost pieces of myself, but I'd found others stronger, truer, rooted in a truth I'd earned. That was my story, my root, my bloom, a life I'd built from the ground up. What's a choice you've made to heal a wound that still lingers, a step you took to find yourself again? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story, to know how you've grown through pain. If this journey resonated, please like and subscribe to join me in finding light through the cracks in telling stories of healing and hope. Share this with someone who needs it, someone walking their own hard path. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to growing one quiet step at a time, to finding peace in the life we choose.